Hey, this is Doc saying think before you act. Welcome to this particular segment of Capsim, which we will talk about opportunity costs and opportunity market loss, if there could be a rhyme. Let me share my screen and we'll get specifically to that when we talk about this particular opportunity cost. And what I mean by this is that we have a lot of students seem to think that ebb is okay where it is. In other words, they tend to not put ebb in the ideal position. Now, think of the ideal position as both figurative and literally. So, figuratively, it represents a place in the marketplace that's top of mind, and if that's the case, related to the customer buying criteria. And so it has to figuratively be in the right spot, but literally be in the right spot as well. Because as you know, if you have car dealerships, right, that has a certain social economic background associated with those who might buy a certain car, having it in a physical location outside of where that normal, day of walking, traveling, operating in the space may not hinder sales, but it sure wouldn't sweeten the pot, so to speak. So caps don't have ideal positions. And in this particular case, ebb is in a position where the ideal position may be in the near future. So students tend to not want to move ebb because they say, why should I move it? Because it's the ideal position is basically going to come to ebb, and therefore I'm wasting money in R&D. I'm wasting money maybe in reliability if I decide to move it. My thing is that if you do not move it, then that does not mean that the market share moves on or it waits for you. That means that any of the other competitors inside that market space can then come in and eat that share. And once they actually are able to obtain that particular share of the marketplace, that gives them a competitive advantage with market share and what market share can do, because market share can make an industry more expensive, it can make an industry unreachable, it can make an industry costly. So in this particular case, we're talking about Ebb, which is our low-end product. And we also, Capstone gives you the industry conditions report, which is basically a description about how to customize your industry, how industries behave, the buying criteria as well. And you see that in this particular industry report, we have the low end. Now, just to make sure that we're all on the same page, what is that low end marketplace in terms of the buying criteria? Well, in this particular figure, we talk about the low end marketplace, which is high end, which is right here. So here's the low end marketplace. The low end marketplace is characterized by pricing as an importance of 53% of the buying decision, age 24%, ideal position 16%, and then mean time before failure or quality at 7%. Now, what students tend to think is that because quality is only 16% of the buying criteria, well, we won't even touch it, right? Or ideal position is only 16% of the buying criteria, we won't even touch it. We'll just wait till the market comes to us. And if we lose anything, it's only 16%. That's a whole fallacy in that thought process. This 16% is important, as if you were competing in a marketplace where the pricing was the same, the importance was about the same, and the quality is about the same, then obviously the person who is closer to the ideal position then will reap a better chance of selling more products. Doesn't mean that the competitor won't sell any products. It's just that this person will reap the chance of generating selling more products, and in selling more products, then that person will tend to get more market share. And we'll have another video about how market share can impact your decisions. So in this particular case, we want to make sure that as we move into, in this particular example, I think we're going into the second round, the end of the second round, end of this round for this particular group of students. We're talking about, do we leave ebb here or do we move it in the ideal position? And where's the ideal position? The ideal position seems to be just about where it is. Now, I call a couple of things into play. One is calculate the ideal position and put the product there, and then you eyeball it, right? You eyeball it as another task in identifying if you made an error or not in calculating the ideal position. So for example, these are where the products that are at the end of the last position, whether they were in the ideal position or not. We see that at the end of the second year, each should be somewhere in the center, right? This is the traditional and should be in the center. The high end should be somewhere around 4 o'clock. Size is about 4 o'clock as well as performance. So they should be somewhere around this area. And low end is somewhere around 10 and a half, or in terms of o'clock and position, but a little bit closer here. It seems to be that ebb might be there or not, right? All the others are definitely out of position. So we have to calculate what that position is. Now, I calculate it quite differently from other professors, and maybe what your book might tell you. Here's my understanding. If Capsim gives me the center segment at the end of each round, in other words, I know the center of the marketplace for every product in every round, and Capstone then gives me the ideal position, which is the offset of that center segment. So basically, it gives you the center segment, right? Capstone gives you the center segment of each one of these at the end of those rounds, plus the adjustment to take that product into the ideal position. So as we look at those two numbers, and I know there are other ways of calculating how your product should be in the ideal position, but for me, this works best. I'm looking at the low end product. I'm also looking at it at the end of the second round. So I'm utilizing these two sets of number here. 16 for performance and 3.5 for performance and 16.5 for size. If I know that those are the two positions for the low end at the end of the second round for the center of that marketplace, and I know that I have the offsets, which is this here, which is basically the calculation from the center to that ideal position, I can go ahead and make that information now. I can put that information in. As a matter of fact, if you did the situation analysis, you know, and just didn't fill in the numbers, you know that this is part of what we call a situation analysis as well. So for example, 3.5 for performance minus the adjustment from the center to the ideal position for the low end at the end of round two is minus 0.8. So 3.5 minus 0.8 is 2.7, if I'm not mistaken, 2.7. Also, 16.5 for that low end size at the end of round two. 16.5 plus 0.8 is, if I'm not mistaken, 17.3. So we're talking about 2.7 and 17.3. So we put those in. 2.7 and 17.3. And I hit recalculate. Now, here's the interesting thing. That looks about right, right? Let me check, let me make sure that that's appropriate. So that looks about right. If I check the industry conditions report, yeah, that is about right. Now, if I see this somewhere else in a different position, other than where the ideal position is, I can go back and say I made an error in calculation. But that looks about right. And so look at the difference in ebb, where it will be at the end of round two in the ideal position, as opposed to where it is now, and then wait. There's not that much of a difference, right? So would ebb, would that actually sell? Yeah, it probably will sell. It probably sell a lot if you had got all the other buying conditions. But the point is that Capstone is designed to give you reasonable decision-making authority across all products. So by not necessarily moving it to that spot, maybe someone might out forecast you by 200, 300, 400. Maybe someone might outcast you by 1,000 because they mistakenly orally lowered the price and not making any money on it. But the point is that if you leave this as is, or if ebb was in a bigger difference than where it would be at the end of round two, you risk losing those products, losing those customers, and then most importantly, losing that market share. So the point of making sure that you're always in the ideal position is so that you can, at a minimum, manage the entire buying criteria. You want to be able to say to yourself that for that low end marketplace, I am in not only the right, not only am I in the ideal position, so basically means that if I'm competing against another similar product that both he or she and I actually have 16% of the ideal position. And that if my quality is appropriate, right? If I have the higher quality, I can still sell as many with lower quality. It just depends on how I want to position this product. And then my age is 7 years or under, as the other person might have 7 years and under. I'm in a good position to sell out my forecast if it's a reasonable forecast. But if I'm not in this position, I give the simulation, I give the marketplace one more thing to not buy my product, even though it might be a good product and might be a little bit off, right? So one last point to not center or to center or not to ideal or to ideal. I was trying to think of something Shakespearean. Um, what does that revision date mean? Well, the revision date basically says that the date the product will be complete, and until this date, the product is produced with the original specs, and after this date, the product is produced with new specifications. Think of the revision date as your marketing foray into the marketplace, your communication into the marketplace that suggests to the customer that your product is in the ideal position, and therefore they are in the buying criteria that's most appropriate to sell this product. And so that if it goes beyond that revision date, you don't communicate that year to the marketplace that you are creating a product for that particular year. Think also of it in terms of like cars and the latest car, right? Cars features vary from year to year, and they might vary by a very small amount, but cars features can't vary beyond the year that they want to produce it in, right? So if a car decides to do a little bit more luxury here, a little bit more performance there, they have to make sure that that product or that luxury and those convenience are incorporated within that year's design to get it out the door. If they decide to put too much into it, too much R&D, too much positioning, too much quality, that might move that car into being completed in the following year, right? Instead of this end of this year, which in this particular example is 2024, it might be 2025. What that means is that the following year, your car won't be able to have any updates. Why? Because there's a continuation beyond that 12 months that R&D has to continue to be put into place. So it makes sense that if it's any time in the next year, you don't get a chance to make that decision to the following year. So it's very important to keep your revision date in the year at of which the simulation or the software calls its end of year, which is December 31st. And there's cost to that as well. So a couple of points in terms of to do or not to do in terms of moving into the ideal position, losing out on possible market share and sales also means that you have to make sure that enough of that R&D and movement don't go in to move that product into the following year, because then you'll be locked out of making decisions for that year. Okay, well, that is, let me stop sharing. That's Doc, a PhD in organizational development, and I'm pursuing a PhD in learning sciences, to say, think before you act.